Welcome back. We're at Beaver Creek and I'm with Thomas Credland, the Head of Corporate Development for Rupert Resources. Tom, good to see you.
Yeah.
Kick things off, most people should be familiar with the story, but those who aren't, who are Rupert Resources?
Rupert Resources has 100% of the Ikkari project in the central Lapland greenstone belt of northern Finland. We're at PEA stage. We published a study which showed essentially a 4 million ounce mining inventory with for the project with a $1.6 billion NPV, lowest quartile costs and very competitive capex. We're sort of proceeding with our pre-feasibility study at the moment, which we'll publish in the second quarter of next year. And we're also embarked on a 50,000 metre exploration drill program, which we'll run over this winter.
Good. Okay, I want to touch on loads of that, but just a housekeeping, just touch on your capital structure to begin with.
Yeah, so we have no debt. We have about 202 million shares out, and last reported cash was about $59 million at the end of May.
Good. Ikkari, as it stands, obviously, arguably one of, if not the best development gold asset in the world at the moment. If you look at AISC versus NAV and things along those lines, you are one of the lowest quartile cost curve. It's a huge ratio between your NPV and your actual capex. Have you drawn a line in the sand at Ikkari now? Have you found it? Is that done, or is there more to be done at Ikkari?
No, I think there's a sort of a bit of a two-pronged approach to the sort of Ikkari and its development. I think we've got a critical mass of resources now at Ikkari, so 4 million ounces or so, and so it's important to move those, move the project forward, and so that's the basis we've sort of committed to the pre-feasibility study for next year. So it allows us to kind of de-risk the project and move. We're currently trading at kind of $110 an ounce as we move forward to the eventual production at Ikkari. The sort of you'll move to a more of a reserve, in situ reserve type valuation of kind of close to $400 an ounce. So you're trying to sort of progress the project forwards, along that kind of pathway, and then you can top up that resource inventory with new discoveries. So our finding cost for Ikkari is around about $15 probably less than $15 a discovered ounce. So you're finding ounces for $15 and you're converting those into something which could be worth 400.
Yeah, well, even converting that from 15 to 100 as it is at the moment is still pretty impressive. Yeah, I don't think many mining companies can claim that. Talk me through the strategy with the drilling. Obviously 50,000 meters is quite a lot. How much of that remains on Ikkari? Because obviously you did a load of infill, you've done a lot of testing on Ikkari last campaign. Is this new campaign still focused on Ikkari slightly, or is it more focused on the greenfield and the further? Well,
we have a rolling kind of 6 to 8 targets to test. There's always the difference between 6 and 8 is probably the 2 that we don't know about yet. So the Ikkari discovery is only sort of 3 years old, so it's kind of very early days in the belt. The plan is to probably drill some depth extensions at Ikkari. We haven't really tested it lower down yet. So, again, looking for sort of higher grade underground ounces there. And then also, look, the other thing that we're looking for Ikkari is to create some operational flexibility, and to maybe we've got a bit of a dip in production in about 7 or 8. So any sort of satellite type discovery at that point would be very interesting as well. So, those are the kind of 2 areas which would be immediately additive to the Ikkari valuation. But we have probably one of the best pieces of ground in the district, 10-kilometre structure to test. So that's going to be one of the things we're testing over the winter, as well as in the eastern end of the property. There's quite significant base metals potential, and then regionally as ground becomes available, and if we think we like it based on our kind of proprietary geological models, we'll pick that up as well.
The ground east, that's closer to Anglo Americans. That's a Aarti project, isn't it? So your licenses are pretty close to there, where there's one of the largest base metal development projects in Europe, right? If not,
yeah, I mean it's one of the great discoveries of the last decade, really, or sort of the last 15 years. So it's 40 million ounces at a kind of 4 or 5% copper equivalent. So it's an amazing discovery, and obviously you have the Boliden Kevitsa mine up there as well. So you have very good prospects for base metals mineralization. I mean I think the fact that you can still find that there's been the Finnish Geological Survey has been very active in that region, looking for those kind of targets for several decades. We have some very good data to start off with, but I think there's Anglo American was successful because they did their own base of till surveys, new geophysics surveys, and so you just have to cover the ground really. So I think there's still potential to find a significant base metals deposit in that region, as evidenced by the arrival of kind of Rio Tinto as well into central Lapland.
How are you going about, because obviously it's such a large area of licenses that you have at the moment, how are you going about actually identifying and what's the exploration model? Are you still using base of till and using anomalies and then further testing those? How are you going about finding out where you should be drilling at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, base of till is a useful tool, and it's how we discovered Ikkari, and so it's our sort of primary exploration tool really. But it's worth noting that not all of Ikkari comes to surface, and there will be deposits that sort of were not delineated by base of till. So regional geophysics has a role, but increasingly it comes down to our own sort of geological interpretation and what we know from our work at Ikkari, and what we're kind of looking for in some of those regional targets. So I think again, we try and take a kind of a relatively big company approach to doing these things. So start with a big tract of land and sort of winnow things down. So we're not sort of drilling on top of ourselves, but the approach which led to the discovery of Ikkari was to leave things behind which didn't hit our hurdle rate, we didn't think had potential to get bigger, and that's part of it, is to kind of cut the things that don't work and sort of move on to other ground, because it's that's how you make bigger discoveries.
Good. Okay. Something that we've actually been talking to by quite a few people here is actually the amount of corporates here at this conference, and there seems to be a sense at Precious Metal Summit that the majors and the mid-tiers are actually finally really looking to extend their development pipeline, their exploration pipeline, and really looking to do some deals potentially here. Are you experiencing a similar experience for the conference?
Well, I think we're fortunate in the sense we have a pretty robust project and a kind of a very realistic go it alone plan. Ikkari works very well on a standalone. You're in a very stable part of the world. It has as you say, lowest quartile costs. A kind of capex number, which means you don't have to massively dilute the company in order to build the project. So I think to start off with, go it alone plan is realistic. The markets have supported us and have funded us at every stage through the project development. So I think that's also encouraging. But we're cognizant that Ikkari would improve almost anyone's business based on its low carbon emissions potential, its low cost potential, its resource growth potential. So we acknowledge that it may be something that that the sort of senior producer would be interested in. I don't think from an operations standpoint we're doing anything kind of irrational or anything that a bigger company wouldn't do. So at any point along the continuum between now and production, we would, I guess, always consider something that was in the best interest of the shareholders. Yep. But certainly we're lucky that we do have a go it alone plan which works.
Talk me through the plan at the moment with the feasibility study. Are you looking at the project in any way differently to how you did for the PEA? I
mean, no, it's essentially the same. It'll be a low strip open pit. So probably 2.5 times the average open pit grade for gold mines.
Yeah, it's about 2.5 grams, right?
Yeah, about 2.5 grams, and then an overall a 3.6 to 1 strip ratio with a much lower, more like 1 to 1 in the first few years. So that very very profitable in the early years, and then an underground component, in years about 10 to 11. So the kind of probably the major change with considering, and where we've got to do this trade-off studies in the next few months, is to considering maybe a long hole open stoping mining method underground versus sub-level caves. So that's to be worked through. We'll have confirmation of that as we start the pre-feasibility work. But essentially, the flow sheet is very straightforward. I don't expect that to change very much. Again, a relatively small mill, milling quite a coarse grind size, and then a very plain vanilla flow sheet with a high gravity component and high mass pull.
So obviously you've got the MRE coming out relatively soon. One of, I wouldn't say critique, but one of the areas of improvement within the PEA was when you have that transition from open pit to underground, there was a a reduction in production ounces until you obviously ramped up the underground. Does that new PEA, or do you think that the work that you've done, the drilling that you've done over the last year, would that potentially sort of improve that production profile?
Yeah, I mean, until we get into the mine planning stage, it's quite hard to say, but, you know, you can definitely improve on that sort of, you know, just with the resources you have, you could probably improve that sort of scheduling so you don't have that dip in years 7 and 8.
Yeah.
You know, you can use stockpiling strategies, or, you know, or maybe even bring the underground in early. So, I mean, all that's under review, and that will form part of the PFS.
Good. Okay. And I guess last thing, most people want to know about is permitting in Finland. You're at that stage now where you really need to starting that process. How's that going so far?
Yeah, it's going very well. We've submitted our EIA program document, and we've had initial feedback on that. So there's no apparent showstoppers at this point. You know, the goal really is to kind of try and constrain the project parameters in the PFS, and that will be the basis we use to submit our EIA. So we're on the critical path. There's been no deviation so far. So you know, looking to get it, you know, get the permits in the most sort of expeditious and timely way as possible.
But you're also in an area where there is already a lot of mining history and heritage, right? Where there are very large operations around you that are in operation and are permitted. So I guess that adds a bit of confidence too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're taking anything for granted. I mean, it's Western Europe, so you have to go through due process. There's no shortcuts, and I don't think, you know, we've always acknowledged that. So we started baseline data collection in sort of 20, you know, pretty much as soon as we started exploring in 2017. So we've always had that in mind. We've got a very good permitting team working for us, who've permitted other projects in Lapland. So, you know, we're very well set up to deal with the permitting process. But, you know, it's you know, we'll work through process, and I think the main thing with the permitting is to make sure that you know, we get there in the end. I think, you know, we don't want to do anything in a rush. We want to work with stakeholders and the permitting authorities and get to the you know, the right answer in terms of you know, the best possible project, not just for shareholders, but also for the other stakeholder groups in Finland.
Yeah, good. Okay. And just talk me through the last, I guess the next 12 months. What can we expect? We've got the MRE, but you mentioned a PFS as well. What else can we be seeing over the next year?
Well, look, I mean, we've discussed the studies we're working on, which is obviously, you know, which will frame the value of the ounces we have already at Ikkari. But the thing I'm honestly most excited about is to get back to exploration drilling, having had a year doing project drilling and all the important stuff, which, you know, doesn't necessarily set the market. Is very important to move the project forward, but doesn't necessarily set the market alight. So that you know, exploration is still a big component of what we do. You know, mindful that, you know, the Ikkari discovery is only 3 years old, and there will be other discoveries to be made in the region.
Agreed. Tom, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Cheers.